Okay, so how about let's get started. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you caught the rescheduling note and we're able to be here tonight. I think it's very worthwhile that we decided to continue to finish the whole series with Noises Off. I think it's going to be a really great presentation. I hope you had a chance to either read it or see it, or you saw it on the stage in the past, but also the film, just in case anybody doesn't know, is actually available in its entirety for free on YouTube, so you can watch it if you haven't watched it yet. Mark may have a few comments about between the film and the stage version. They're quite a bit different. I just want to mention, since it's the final session, that we're very appreciative of Amy Quigley's family, because all these literary programs and series are all made possible from the generosity of the literary series in memory of Amy Quigley. Uh, I can tell you that Mark and I have already started talking about the next series, and it'll probably be in the spring. And I also want to mention to you that you'll be getting an email from me asking about having the next series with Mark in person in the library, but also with a camera. So if you're not in the area or you can't come to the library, you'll still be able to watch it on Zoom. But maybe we want to try it as a hybrid and have him actually here. So when you see that email from me, just let me know what you think. And with that, now I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Michael. And let me add to my usual thanks to Michael and Wilton for inviting me, that I appreciate his resourcefulness in allowing me to cancel the last meeting on very short notice and to reschedule to tonight. And also, I want to thank him for his time and energy in helping me with a technical problem earlier today. So I'm going to make some comments about farce, which is this category of play in general, before turning it over to you. I'm hopeful, not only because this is the last of our 6 and you don't get to talk about this stuff with me anytime soon, but because I hope this is a very accessible play in terms of what's called reader response criticism. What did you think of it? So let me first say that farce, as a word and as an idea and as a dramatic category, dates back to the Middle Ages. It comes from a Latin word meaning to stuff, and it really refers to inferior meats that are used as stuffing in other dishes. It's exactly synonymous with the English word bologna. When you say to somebody, oh, you're all bologna, we mean you're all an inferior meat, a stuffing. And it was called stuffing because it originated as a dramatic category in religious plays in the Middle Ages, when certain revisionists started stuffing into the serious play ribald or rowdy or horseplay. You might have a nativity scene, and off to the side, a farting shepherd. Or you might have a scenario where one of the 3 wise men gets lost. It would never be something insulting to the religious figures themselves, but it would be something would be put in to punctuate the solemnness, to puncture the solemnness, and to appeal to the largely illiterate audiences in the Middle Ages. That's how farce originated. There's a great variety of farce. I can say that we did The Importance of Being Earnest some meetings back, and that's clearly a farce that's very different from something like Waiting for Godot, which is very much a farce, even though of a very different kind. And then we could turn to the TV episodes of Monty Python's Flying Circus, which is very farcical. And think of the range of genres in the farce of Ernest and Godot and Monty Python. You have only to think of something like The Three Stooges, clearly farce, very popular in the movies and then for a long time as syndicated TV, where no one would accuse them of being witty in the comedy of manner sense of Oscar Wilde. And on the other side of that equation, you could look at something like the Marx Brothers, who are also farcical, but you would never confuse their comedy, their movies with the Three Stooges. Not to say that one is better than the other. I could make that argument, but I'm not. but very different from one another. Silent films often are farcical. Think of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton in particular. Um, you have movies like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, a very good example of cinematic farce. A knockoff of that is National Lampoon's Family Vacation. I'm sure you know that. And there are certain movie comedians like Bob Hope or Danny Kaye or Jerry Lewis, either with Dean Martin or on his own, who tended to make farcical movies. So some of the common elements of farce, and any farce can have some or all of these. One is stereotypical characters, even more extravagantly stereotypical and wooden than in a regular comedy. Absolutely improbable situations, a tendency towards the physical, whether it's slapstick, and slapstick comes from the sound made by the stick used in vaudeville and earlier theaters, where when you hit it against anything, the two pieces of wood slapped against each other and made a sound that was louder than the sound of, say, the object on someone's backside. And that's where slapstick came to be born. So physicality that can range from slapstick and horseplay to very serious violence, very rowdy violence. Silent films were very fond of having accidents and near accidents, of having the kind of cartoon thing we see in Wile E. Coyote blowing up the Roadrunner or getting himself blown up and then being reconstituted in the next scene. Another element in farce is implicit or explicit criticism of the social order. And now, again, the Three Stooges is not high-minded. They're poking fun. They want you to laugh. But the Marx Brothers are trying to puncture pomposity. Monty Python has some of that when they send up people who are posh and so on. A wide range of what farce can do. Something else that's true of some farces that you may not think of is the idea of speed or velocity. We've all seen silent films of the Keystone Cops, those manic law enforcement officers running around. It turns out that if you take a regular scene of a car with police officers chasing a car that has bandits in it, and you play it at high speed, the way silent films don't have to, but often do, just the velocity of the scene makes it funny, makes it farcical, because it's hyperbolic. It's faster than the car is actually moving. When things happen in a scene speedily, like somebody answering quickly or too quickly, there are such scenes in tonight's play. That's also part of a comedy. Also, often there's not only mistaken identity, but extravagant mistaken identity. Shakespeare wrote at least one farce, um, the the um, the Comedy of Errors, in which there are two sets of twins, a mistaken identity again. A classic bit of physical play that everyone in the Zoom room tonight has seen is when you're at the end of a hotel or apartment building hallway and people are going in and out of doors looking for each other, and no two people are in the hallway at the same time. It's time so that just as somebody closes the door, someone opens the door. That's also an element of physical comedy, not physical in terms of one person moving, but the setup of the scene. So I'll take a breath there and say that's sort of the general world of farce. But this is a particular kind of farce because it's also a meta play. It's not only a play, noises off, that has another play in it, nothing on. But when you title a play a stage direction, noises off is a stage direction alerting the cast, the crew, the company that something's supposed to be happening off stage. If you call a play noises off and someone knows what it means, and your program, your playbill would tell you that if you were in the theater, you know you're going to watch a play about a play. Early television, George Burns and Gracie Allen broke the fourth wall, the so-called fourth wall that the Office series has broken and is very common. Woody Allen would break it in some of his movies. That is, the television screen or the movie screen would be broken through when the actors are talking to the audience. This play breaks the back wall, not the front wall, separating the audience from the actors, but separating the actors from life backstage. And Michael Frayn said that some 10 years before he wrote the play, he had the idea while standing backstage that what was going on behind the scenes was funnier than what was going on in front of the scenes. And so this play in 1982 and the movie followed 10 years later broke new ground in being not just a play about a play, that's happened before, but actually looking at the tension between behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. Carl Reiner, the great Carl Reiner, wrote a memoir of his breaking into the theater world called Enter Laughing. It was made into a very good movie with Jose Ferrer and Rene Santoni as a young Carl Reiner protagonist, and Elaine May as the femme fatale. And it's called Enter Laughing because in his ignorance, the Bronx kid who's trying to break into show business and is being conned by two theater professionals, Elaine May and Jose Ferrer, reads his first line and doesn't know that Enter Laughing is a stage direction. So he says, Enter Laughing. And of course, the movie, the memoir, the play they made of it are all called Enter Laughing. When you hear that, you know that that's going to be a play about the playfulness of play, the art of play. It's exactly the same thing with Noises Off, although that's less known to people as an expression. So I want to say that I think this covers a range of elements of farce, from true wit, clever word and situations, to physical comedy, to the idea of being very meta. Many farces, you have the sense that the people in the farce are aware that this is not real. Monty Python sketches depend upon the fact that whenever they get tired of doing what they're doing, they can say to the audience, and now for something completely different, and shift. And that's already back to the 1960s. So that's old already. I'm going to stop setting the table there and ask whether you've seen the play as a play or seen it as a movie or seen parts of it on your internet, or you read the play, and it's a challenging play to read for obvious reasons. I wonder if we could start the conversation by saying, what did you think of it as a meta farce? I'm happy to know anything you want to say about the play in particular, but how did you find it as a play with a lot of busyness in it, a lot of action and ways of looking at the theatrical experience? I wonder if someone would like to get us started on that, remembering that this is your last chance to talk about British comedies with me.
Okay,
I'll let
folks, and you know
Michael.
how to do it. So use the Q&A button down on your screen, and I'll relay your comments or questions to Mark.
Michael, how many people do we have tonight?
Little over 30.
Okay, so that's a good size. There's got to be at least some of you who want to say something about this play. I'll say to fill time that one of the things that farce explicitly does that comedy doesn't always do is, because it's exaggerated, because anyone watching it knows that cops don't move that fast, or the breaking of the fourth wall of Monty Python ending a skit by saying, now let's go to a race among Greek and Roman philosophers, that the zaniness of that, the buffoonery of that, explicitly says this is not reality. So regular comedies are not real, but The Honeymooners is not saying at every turn that this is not everyday reality. It's a comic version of reality, but it's very real. Just look at that bare apartment that the Cramdens live in. But in farce, often every moment of the movie, of the play, is explicitly saying, this is not real. The real world doesn't work this way. And that's part of the fun of it. The word zaniness comes off often. You know, the Marx Brothers are zany. It's a mad, 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 mad world, which is a very good example of cinematic farce loaded with Hollywood stars, from Sid Caesar and Mickey Rooney and others.
I got a couple of comments, Mark.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll give them both to you rather than one at a time because they're not individual questions, they're just comments. One person said, I felt it was funnier to see it than to read it because of all the physical comedy.
Yeah.
And Paul says, I've seen the play on stage and I've seen the movie. I like both, even though the movie got mixed reviews. I think the idea of a play being about plays and how they work made for many hilarious moments. I was laughing out loud.
Yeah, those are two good comments for me to add to. So the first one, it is certainly true that is a play meant to be seen, which is true of all plays. There is a narrow niche of theater called closet dramas. They were very popular in the 16th and 17th century, which were plays written not to be performed theatrically with costumes and props, but read in a parlor as a dramatic reading. Some English departments, including every one I've ever taught at, have a tradition that at the holiday season or a certain maybe winter break resuming, the faculty will do a staged reading of A Christmas Carol, where people are at podia reading the lines of people. Maybe somebody's wearing a nightcap to be Scrooge, but there are no props, there's no scenery, there's no costumes. Except for the narrow niche of costume dramas, all dramas are meant to be seen rather than read, or both. And there's a special challenge to reading this play and understanding it, not just because, as with any play, if you read Hamlet and never see it, you have to decide in your own direction. When Hamlet cries out in pain, is he angry or is he sad? Is he weeping or is he holding back fury? And great actors have gone to either ends of that continuum. Here, you have to keep in mind all the busyness that's going on. And I told some friends of mine who knew that I was doing this tonight, who had never heard of the play or had heard of it and never seen it, who asked me whether they should read it. And I told them they should see it if they could, and then read it, which is always the best way to do any play. As for the movie versus theatrical, I agree with Frank Rich. Actually, he's a little extreme. He thought the play Noises Off was the funniest play written in his lifetime, and that's saying something because he's not only was not only a prolific theater and movie critic, but he was a tough sell. And he added that he thought the movie was one of the worst films he'd ever seen. I can only say that the problem with the movie, if you've seen it on stage first, is that it doesn't matter how good the actor or director. It was Peter Bogdanovich. There are very good actors, including Carol Burnett in the lead, Michael Caine. You cannot do on film what this play requires you to do in the theater. And that's really the end of it. It doesn't mean you can't like it. And it's funny enough to be laugh out funny in whatever medium you see it. It is unusual for a play to be this out loud funny. If you think of the first 5 plays we've done, Importance of Being Earnest, which I said can be laugh out loud funny. The Twelfth Night is not a play that's meant to be laugh out loud funny. It's a romantic comedy about love. And we've seen that most of the plays we've looked at are not much about love. And although they're about comedy, they're not always about laugh out loud comedy. Uh, the importance of being earnest, the importance of being earnest has the advantage of being funny in its construction, in its idea, and funny in many, many witty lines. We haven't read plays that can compete with that kind of double funniness until tonight.
Okay, so Kelly's got a comment. I saw the movie on YouTube. I was prepared to be underwhelmed by a slapstick show, and in the first few minutes, I thought I was going to leave. But then magic. It became fabulous, so complex and sophisticated. I was mesmerized for the rest of the movie. Thanks so much for including this. My sister had only seen it in a play and was equally charmed, but when I told her about the movie, she was delighted with that too. I can't wait to see it in person. This transcends the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges by a long shot.
Okay, I have to represent the Marx Brothers by saying I don't like to hear the Marx Brothers and Three Stooges put in the same sentence. I don't look down my nose at the Three Stooges. They're doing something very different. Abbott and Costello did farcical things too, but the Marx Brothers, I think, are high comedy. But I will say that one of the things about this is that it's not just a farce. I think Michael Frayn, in his brilliance, decided to take the idea of farce, the idea of theater about theater, the new idea about making the theatrical event happen in front and behind the stage, and made a play that is funny in so many different ways. Again, both in its conception, in the construction, doesn't really have a plot per se, and in the witticism of the lines. Um, I do think it's a great play as a metaphor.
And one other comment at the moment, a short one. It says that I have noticed that they used a lot of repetition.
And that's the end of the comment?
Yep.
Yeah. So the scene where she keeps repeating the line as she's taking the plate away, and the director is telling him the rehearsal, giving her notes, and then finally saying, no, you're doing it wrong implicitly. It is intrinsically funny for something to be repeated often, especially if each time there is a slight variation. It's called incremental repetition, that each time it changes just a little bit. There's also the undercurrent if you're a theater person, and I'm sure that some of the 30 of you have sometime been in a play or on stage in a play or helped with the music or casting or writing of a play. When you go to see an extraordinary performance of some theatrical classic like Streetcar Named Desire in a revival in a great theater in Philadelphia, you can be aware that not only has this play been done hundreds of times before in theaters all over the world, a great classic play, but the company doing this play the night you're there watching it, they're doing it 100 times that season. They are doing it again and again and again, and their glory is not to make it seem routine. That's very different from the great actors who are frozen on celluloid or other media in a film, and you watch it and it is never going to change. I do think that Frayn understands that repetition is at the soul of theatrical performance, because once you're done, you have to do it again. Even the construction, which I think is brilliant, that each of this play's 3 acts is the same act of nothing on in different stages of evolution and devolution. That itself is brilliant, I think.
That's actually the comment that just came while you were speaking. Amy says, I thought the funniest aspect of the play was how it repeated the same scene of nothing on 3 times, each time devolving into greater chaos. Thanks.
That go ahead, keep
I
going.
just no, she just added, thanks for including this play in the series.
Okay, that's Amy.
Yeah.
See, I knew Amy was going to say that. That's why I brought it up just before you called on her. So I want to say that the brilliance of that is that one of the fundamental things in life is that 2 comes after 1 and 3 comes after 2. And a 3-act comic structure is a classic thing. 5-act tragedies, 3-act comedies. A basic elemental thing that teenagers, pre-teenagers know is that Act 1 comes before Act 2, comes before Act 3. And if they don't know about climax and anticlimax and complication, you know that the first act sets exposition, the second act complicates things, the third act resolves it. What an audacious, brilliant move to decide that this play, Noises Off, is going to be composed of 3 acts that are all the same act, but not the same act. And if there's anyone here tonight who has neither read nor seen the play, and you're welcome to come, I'm not asking you to make a self-confession, but you can't appreciate in any description about the play how brilliantly he pulls it off, despite the complications. If you were only listening to me talk and the comments from a few of you who've said something as a question or comment, you can't begin to appreciate how brilliant it is. Excuse me. Excuse me. So, does anyone want to talk now more specifically, since we've been speaking for a while, of a particular bit of shtick that you liked or didn't like because it struck you as funny or struck you as too gimmicky or too unbelievable? Would anyone like to speak to that point?
Well, we'll give them a minute. Right now, the person who made the comment about the repetition, just as a follow-up, said, thank you so much for your answer. I could sense the repetition was an important aspect of the play, and you just explained it so well why that is.
Let me say that repetition is so much to be avoided in regular speech or writing that you've all had high school or college teachers circle something and say, avoid needless repetition. If you use someone's name 5 times instead of using the pronoun him or her. But even when we say, I didn't know that that person would be there. I didn't know that that person would be there. That's 2 that's in a row that mean different things. I didn't know that that person would be there. Most people without any coaching will emphasize them differently. I didn't know that that person would be there, because they don't want to say, I didn't know that that person, that. It is a natural thing in human speech. I think it's in all languages, that if you have an absolute repetition, you do something to inflect so that you distinguish between the words as not being identical.
So here's a contra comment from Kate. I'm an outlier on this play. I saw the play on Broadway years ago, and I remember not liking it. I read it for our program, and I'm still not a fan. I love Monty Python, but this play reminds me much more of Benny Hill. I appreciated your description of the range of farces, and now I am more aware why I prefer the wit in plays like The Importance of Being Earnest. In response to your question, I think the sardines bit was really annoying.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, is that Pete?
Kate.
Kate. Thank you, Kate. I want to say I'm glad for variety of opinion always. I've taught a long time, and I'm always happy when people have a range of opinions. I don't think any kind of art is to everyone's taste. And I know many people who cannot stand the Three Stooges or Marx Brothers. I have a very dear friend who has never thought Monty Python is funny. I myself think they're hysterical, but I understand that different people have different points of view. And when you talked about Benny Hill, my father-in-law, who recently died, could not stop laughing when he would watch Benny Hill. He thought it was just the funniest thing. And I know people who think that it's just idiotic. They can't understand how that man became famous in England and elsewhere. I think that's the nature of taste, just as there are people who love Shakespeare's plays, and there are quite literate people who are intelligent and well-read who do not particularly care for Shakespeare. Um, there's no accounting for taste. You can't argue about taste. You like what you like. Um, I remember that years ago, Jay Leno said that the fundamental difference, before he was Jay Leno of The Tonight Show, when he was a stand-up comedian, that the fundamental difference between men and women is that women despise the Three Stooges and men adore them. And that in a recent New York Times polls of men most admired by men, it was Winston Churchill, Gandhi, and Moe. That was his joke. And yet the Three Stooges were on syndicated TV all through my childhood and not just watched by little kids. And Abbott and Costello, in their wartime World War II movies, and then the TV show that followed, have a lot of farcical things in it. Who's on First? And of course, the Marx Brothers made theatrical and then movie history in being great comedians as a family in the 30s and 40s, and not so successfully in the 50s.
So
I want to recommend, if you've never seen It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and you don't dislike farce, that may be worth a look sometime to check that out.
So Paul says, I watched several versions of the sardines bit online and found all of them annoying except Carol Burnett's version, which I thought was very funny. So I think a lot depends on how such lines are presented.
Well, of course that's true of any play, of any performance. It's a good point, but I mean, yes, how it's presented. Also, we have to be mindful that we're unaware of how knowing an actor and maybe having associations. I mean, Carol Burnett was one of the most successful TV stars in our lifetime. She resurrected the variety show, and she was successful and funny with a good comedy troupe. And there was a lot of farce in Tim Conway bits with Harvey Korman. She did farcical things. You remember the great scene of her coming down the staircase as Scarlett O'Hara, having made a dress out of a straw window curtain and still having the curtain rod as her shoulder pads. I do think we are unknowingly influenced by having a line delivered by Michael Caine or Mark Lynn Baker or Carol Burnett. And I do think it's possible to have something not be funny 10 times in a row and be funny the 11th time. I'm sure some of you have had the experience of hearing a joke multiple times in the course of your life. And sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's not. And it could be the occasion or your mood, but often it's just a slight difference in who's telling it and how.
For the moment, that's it for the comments.
Michael, just remind me where we are on time.
It's about 22 minutes before 8.
Okay, so I
Oh, we
don't.
just got a comment, got a
Okay,
question.
good.
I have a question about the idea of the play not showing reality. In this particular play, could the experience of rehearsal be real?
Oh, well, I want to make it clear. Yes, obviously everything that's happening in this two play meta play is real in the sense that there's nothing fantastic in the sense of fantastic fantasy or surreal. It's absolutely real. In fact, it's more hyper real in showing that there's something going on backstage in every theater, in every play, even if a particular play doesn't have the direction that noises are happening off stage. But what makes it unreal is that this is not how we experience a play. It's not the unreality of reality, it's the unreality of how theater works. And one of the conventions of theater is that we watch what's in front of in the front of the stage and not behind the stage. And of course, as theater gets more and more developed over the years, they've changed either through technology. One of the things that made Streetcar revolutionary is that the set designer, the lighting designer, I wish I remembered his name, figured out a way to have a scrim that if you shone light on it in one direction, it was opaque. And if you shone light in another direction, you could see through. And so in Streetcar and in Glass Menagerie, the dreamlike vision that Tennessee Williams had was aided by the fact that you could sit in a theater and see one side of the back wall, and in a change of lighting, you could look through that back wall and see inside the house. Very dreamlike. That was technology. Technology made that happen. Or you get something like Marlon Brando as a phenomenon coming on board the world and infusing the character of Stanley Kowalski with an energy that people had never seen before. I mean, a real revolution in the theater that was because it was Marlon Brando. And they've done the play with other people, as they should and would have to. But if you've seen him in the movie version, if you were fortunate enough to see him on Broadway, what a remarkable performance in that play. I do think that what I meant, I'll start again. What I meant by the unreality is this is not the reality of seeing a play. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is another play we might have done that's a farce and a meta play. I just don't think it's as funny as this play, so I chose this instead of that. But Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is a meta farcical play, and again, implicitly of the play we're watching and the play that it's riffing on, Hamlet. A good example is Waiting for Godot, which, because it's by Samuel Beckett, and we're told that it's existential and very grim, people who've never seen it, who see it for the first time, are prepared for it to be serious with a capital S. This is an important play, capital I, capital P. It's a very funny play, and very funny both in the farcical sense of wackiness and funny in some lines. There's a great scene where one of the three characters looks out at the audience and says, apropos of the desolated landscape they're in, something like, I see no signs of intelligent life out there. And it's breaking the fourth wall at a time that you don't expect a witty comment from these basically beggar hobos. And it always gets a great laugh because people aren't expecting it. Godot is a very funny play.
Here's a comment from Liz. We are presented with some serious situations to consider in the play. Dottie's life savings invested in the play for her retirement, Selden's disarray, the inland revenue problems, and the pregnancy of Poppy. What are we to make of these issues? They are put out to us and managed in the script, but not really addressed except superficially. Is there a purpose to them being part of the farce?
Okay, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Whose question is that?
Liz.
Liz, so I want to say respectfully, this is an old problem, and that is if you see a movie in which, for comic effect, somebody might have lost their life savings to a con artist, and maybe that's a loose end, that because that's a minor character who lost her savings to a con artist, it's never taken up again. But it's clear that the movie doesn't care enough about that character or that issue because it has other fish to fry. It's a comedy. And somebody might say, well, wait a minute, that happened to my grandmother. I don't think that's funny. And I'm wounded by the fact not only that this happened to this character, but that this movie or play doesn't seem to respect the poignancy of what happened. All you can say is that's the nature when people use serious things in a comic play. When I saw and then read this play, I did not give any mental or emotional energy to the problems that these people have, because at the end of the day, I didn't think about of them as people. I thought about them as characters in an extraordinarily clever and um, rococo play. But it doesn't mean that my reaction is the right reaction. And everybody knows that there are people who don't find slapstick, pratfalls funny, and actually falling on your backside can be very painful. And again, if you're not a fan of Charles Chaplin or Buster Keaton, you may not like how much physical violence there is done. And for both of those men, they did, almost without exception, their own stunts, and some of them terrifyingly dangerous. There are people who would see such a movie and say, that's not funny. And other people would think it's just brilliant. Again, my mother-in-law went to see uh, Animal House, I think it was the 70s, with her family, including me, and we felt sure she would not appreciate the bawdiness, the raucousness of Animal House. She was laughing throughout the movie, and we discovered that she liked silly slapstick movies. She loved John Belushi's impression of a zit, where he's spitting out cream from his face, stuff that I didn't think was particularly amusing. She loved it. Who knows? I do think it's a testament to your sensitivity to be aware of the serious issues in the play. But when you frame the question, what are we to make of this? I think the playwright's answer would be make of it whatever you will, but the play is not taking a position on it. I think it's possible to have something so poignant in a comic play that it wounds you, especially if the problem that is being pushed aside is one that resonates in your personal life. You know, the old problem is that if you see a movie that's meant to be comic and one of the characters in it has the name of a relative of yours who recently died, there's no way the movie's going to know that. But it's a fact, and it's going to change the way you think about that movie forever. I have said to my students, if you see a movie that was filmed before the World Trade Center towers were knocked down, that have them in the background, in the landscape, in the skyscape, that movie, that scene is radically changed for you because that's in the background. I've said this also, if they discover a year from now that there was an unknown a novel by Charles Dickens where a minor character is named Adolf Hitler just by incredible circumstance, there's no way that book can recover from the fact that something that Dickens did not intend is now part of the book, whether anyone likes it or not. You can't wish it away. In the same way that if you see a play where the title character is meant to be Auntie Mame, is meant to be a kind of harebrained, exuberant, wacky, zestful woman, and you have such a woman in your life who destroyed a family through her irresponsibility, that plays a different play for you than for anyone else. Are you reading it wrong? Absolutely not. It's the reader, it's the audience who decides what the play means, not the writer.
So right now, there are no other comments at the moment. I just want to ask you a question. Are you familiar with a movie called Waiting for Guffman?
Of course, I know
Yeah,
that that's a great theater company,
because
sure.
I kept thinking about that because I think it actually, the title is even, I think, supposed to be a pun on Waiting for Godot.
It is, and the person they're waiting for, of course, is the big shot movie reviewer or theater reviewer for this little pathetic production that they're putting on. Yeah, that's Christopher Guest and Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy, that company that also made the movie about the Best in Show about the dog
Yep.
breeding. Yeah, a brilliant company.
Yeah.
What's your question, comment about that movie?
No, I was thinking about that movie after watching Noises Off, the movie Noises Off.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not exactly the same thing, of course, but that was the movie that keeps coming into my mind.
yeah, yeah. I'll say another thing since we're have some time and I don't want to talk over anyone who has a comment, so you can interrupt me, Michael. But one of the things that is implicit in comedy, I'm sorry, in theater, unlike movies, is when you're in a theater, if you're watching a production of Twelfth Night and Orsino comes out in the beginning and says, "If music be the food of love, play on," that's an actual person who is usually played by a male, playing a male character, that doesn't have to be, who is dressed in however the play conceives the contemporary setting and time frame of the play. And so the play is helping you enormously by letting you have a reality that is phony. That guy's not Orsino. He doesn't live in this place and he doesn't dress that way in real life. But everything is done in the illusion of theater to make the unreality seem real. You don't get that kind of help when you read a play. You don't get that kind of help on the printed page of a novel and a short story. No amount of articulate description, whether it's by Faulkner or Jane Austen or Toni Morrison or Philip Roth, can give you a visual sense of somebody that can compete with a brilliant scene in a play that's well designed, well lit, well decorated, well costumed. Theater has the advantage of having real people play imaginary people, which isn't done in a poem or a play, a written play or a novel. And one of the reasons people love theater is you're there. If Paul Giamatti, as he did some years ago, plays Hamlet on stage at the Yale Rep at Yale, you know that's Paul Giamatti if you're a fan and seen him in movies. And he's right there, maybe 100 yards from you, maybe 50 feet from you, playing Hamlet, a part that is famous throughout theatrical history. And there he is in the room with you doing those lines in that play. For people who love theater, I'm one of them. That's a very heady experience. And although I enjoy reading plays, it's hard for any good reading to compete with that.
So the other thing I wanted to mention, since we don't have any additional comments at the moment, is when we spent a good deal of time talking about the repetition, and there was something that was like a gimmicky thing on some cable channel that showed a lot of comedies, and they I don't remember when I saw this. It was definitely a number of years ago, but they called it the rule of three.
Yes.
And once you know the rule of three, you see it. You see it every place. And if
Yeah.
you're watching I say this to my wife. You're watching a comedy, and they do the bit two times, and you go listen for it. And then they do it the third time.
Yeah. And the rule of three is also taught in composition courses, that it has become a practice, and as many practices that have become wooden, now people try to vary it, that when you're giving examples of something, you give three examples. You give one and then a second and a third, that you want to show that you have more than one or two examples. And how many is more than one or two? Three. That's the famous kind of thing. Michael, I'm sorry to ask you again, what time is it?
It is now 8 minutes to 8.
Okay, so I will say that there is an old joke about the idea of how something strikes you by who's telling it, where a young comedian shows up at a joke tellers convention and he finds that he's the only person under 30 at this place that looks like a Friars Club roast. And almost everybody there is 60 or older. And he feels he should leave. And one of the old timers says, "No, sit, come, sit with us, enjoy the show." And first comedian gets up to perform. All these guys are 60 or older, and he says to the crowd, 337, and everybody laughs. And he pauses and he says 992, and everybody laughs. And this happens for two or three comedians, no jokes, just numbers. And the young guy says to the men at his table, "What's going on?" He says, "We're so old, we're so experienced. We know all the jokes by number. We don't tell them anymore. We just say the numbers." He said, "You're kidding." They say, "No, you want to try it?" He says, "Sure." So the guy says, "Here are a couple that are really surefire." He writes them down. The guy stands up, the young guy says 459, nothing. 662, nothing. 17, nothing. He sits down, he says, "What did I do wrong?" "Well, they're good jokes, but your delivery stinks." Thank you, Michael. That's a farcical meta joke, and I'm glad that at least one person was laughing.
That's great. Well, look, it's almost 5 to 8. You want to make any sort of rounding up, concluding comments about either this or the series?
Well, not about the series, that would be too much to do, but about this. When the farce comes from the idea of stuffing, and it began with stuffing bawdiness, rowdiness into a sacred or solemn theatrical experience, people in the theater understood that the contrast was between the solemn, sacred, and the profane or buffoonery. When you see a farce like the several that we've mentioned, you carry with you the idea that Monty Python's farcical reality is different from not a spiritual experience, but what we usually see on TV. You have with you, as part of your experience of the reality of art, that this is not how a TV comedy show works. When you see Noises Off, you have with you in your DNA that this is not like other plays. So you don't need the nativity scene on the stage to remind you that that's very different from a farting shepherd or a wise man who's gone lost. This play relies on you knowing that plays don't work this way. And I think it's a brilliant example of genius. I'm gratified that several of you said that you're grateful that I included it. Some of my friends and colleagues who asked me about this series months ago when I was designing it did not know if it would be successful, did not know if it would seem dated. Some of them didn't know the play well. If you think about the trajectory we've taken from a high romantic Shakespearean comedy of Twelfth Night, one of the best comedies ever written, I think, to the equally brilliant but very different Noises Off, you see what a wide range of experience can be covered in theater like any other art. And if those of you who are here tonight have been here for most or all of the series, I'm grateful. And I'm glad that you came for all of them if you did. It's an uneven lot. And I've left out some of the restoration comedies or the sentimental comedies that aren't as successful. I would say of the 6 plays we've done, 4 of them are undisputed comic masterpieces, and this is one of them. And I want to end by thanking Michael again for all his help and to let you know what you might not know behind the scenes. Michael is the most collaborative partner in terms of actually having a literary sense of what works or not. I have great respect for the librarians I partner with, but many librarians who hire me to come for events are essentially community librarians. They're event planners, and they have a good sense of timing and technology and all of that. But they're not people who I can talk to about, do you think this play would work instead of that? Michael's a very learned person and good at his job, and I want to thank you again. And all of you, if you have follow-up questions, I will answer them by email. I wish you all happy holidays and a great new year, however you celebrate. And we will be back, as Michael said, in the spring in one format or another with another literary program.
Well, thanks for your kind words, Mark. I really enjoy collaborating with you on these from start to finish, and looking forward to the next one. Everybody, have a good evening. Have very nice holidays. Get 2025 off to a good start, and hope to see you around the library and other things we have going on here, and also when we have Mark when we have Mark come back. When I send you the email about the possibility of having him in person, what I'm really trying to get at is how many people do we think would actually come here for that? If there's a reasonable number, it doesn't have to be a large number, but if a reasonable number of people would like to come here in person, then we'll do it in that hybrid way.
Thanks again.
Okay,
Good night,
thanks,
all.
everybody. Good night.